Thanks, DJ. It's good to be here with you, and thank you everyone for attending. I also want to recognize my friend and colleague, Chris Hendricks, who's with us, though we can't see him. And so look, I'll be brief. I really think this is more a forum for residents to answer, to have their questions answered and have their voices heard on this. But look, there's no question we're in the midst of a climate crisis that is impacting all of our lives, and particularly our lives on the Cape and Islands and in Falmouth, where we're very vulnerable to its effects. And as a millennial, there's no issue that will impact my generation and my children's generation more than that of global warming. And the science is abundantly clear that we need to get to net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner if we want to avoid an economic, health, and an environmental catastrophe. But you don't have to hear that from me. We are very fortunate to have world-renowned institutions right here in Falmouth with local scientists doing the work in the field of climate science. And in Massachusetts, we do listen and care about what our scientists say. And to reduce our carbon emissions, to get a handle on this crisis, we need a heavy investment in clean energy. And while solar is terrific, I love solar power, very much support it. I don't have to tell Falmouth locals who just got through a month of the sun setting at 4 o'clock that it's not very sunny here. But we do have wind. We have a lot of it, and it's incredibly powerful at generating the clean energy that we need and will need in the future to light our houses and businesses across the state. And offshore wind is really our surest path to a clean energy future. Back in 2016, the legislature passed, at the time, what was nation-leading legislation calling for the first utility-scale offshore wind farm in the country. And all of these wind projects they have to be at least 10 miles offshore, and these are going, the closest one I believe is 12 miles from the Vineyard, which is in our, right south of our district. And when Massachusetts makes nation-leading policy, other states follow. And after we pass that legislation, up and down the East Coast, other states have called for offshore wind in their home state. And together, combined through all those procurements, we're going to make a massive dent in global carbon emissions. And I think that is something that our state and our district can be really proud to have led that. But we also need to make sure that with any new energy project, these projects are done right, that they're done thoughtfully and respectfully and have local community support. And so that's why I think this forum is so important to get those questions answered. So with that, I want to thank Mayflower for hosting this and listening to the community. And I'll turn it over to my colleague and Falmouth partner, David Vieira, to offer some remarks as well.
Thanks, Dylan. It's great to be here. I want to thank Mayflower Wind for at this stage of the game being here in the community and listening and briefing the community with the latest and the greatest on this project. A project, as Dylan said, that not only has a major impact on our carbon emissions in the future of clean energy in the Commonwealth, in the United States and for the globe, but also a project that will reduce the cost of certain portions of energy, a job creator for the region, an industry creator, programs at places like the Massachusetts Maritime Academy in my district, areas where individuals will come in, economic activity, to be part of building and maintaining this state-of-the-art, world-class facility. We've had a start and go with wind on Cape Cod, particularly in Falmouth, terrestrial based. We had a start and go with wind in the ocean with another project a number of years ago, but we finally have a project that is really, truly, I believe, going to be a win-win for the community, for the environment, for our residents. And so today is a day for all of the individuals that are with us to learn a little bit more about where the project is, to ask questions, and to understand that we're in early steps of bringing this full program to fruition. There'll be necessary votes in the municipal legislature in Falmouth, the town meeting. As many of you know, I also serve as the town moderator. But then there'll also be some things that'll have to happen in the state legislature, which Representative Fernandes and I and Senator Moran will be working on to assist the project moving forward. But I think what's really important for all of us is to understand what some concerns might be from residents in Falmouth so that we can address those concerns. Having worked for months now with the folks at Mayflower Wind, they're willing to make that extra effort to hear the concerns and do what's necessary to address the concerns, make sure we're using the latest and greatest science and information, and then making sure that it's a project that we can all be proud of. Whether we're constructing the project, operating the project, or flipping on our light switches one day, receiving the electrons from that project. So I want to thank Mayflower Wind again for being here today, for doing this for the community. I look forward to the continued work and partnership, bipartisan, with my colleagues, Representative Fernandes and Senator Moran, to bring this project to fruition.
Rep. Vieira, Fernandes, thank you so much for those opening remarks. I will now turn it over to Kelsey Perry and Seth Kaplan from Mayflower Wind to provide us with a presentation on the overview of the project. Kelsey and Seth?
Great, thank you so much, DJ. And thank you both Representative Vieira and Fernandes for that warm welcome. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come and listen to us and learn more about our project and how we're working to help the administration meet their goals here in Massachusetts. And with that, I will go ahead and get started with our presentation. So just for the basics, Mayflower Wind is a joint venture between Shell New Energies and Ocean Winds. Ocean Winds is a new collaboration between two renewable energy companies, EDP Renewables and ENGIE. Together, our sponsors have decades of experience working alongside host communities and dealing with the complexities of large-scale offshore energy projects. We are grateful to have their experience behind us as we move forward into this new and exciting industry of offshore wind. A little bit more about Mayflower Wind as a company. We are guided by our three core values listed below. We are first and foremost we're committed to investing in our local communities. We're looking to build transparent and responsible relationships with the town of Falmouth and surrounding communities by supporting economic development, contributing to STEM education and workforce development. Our top priority at Mayflower Wind is safety first and safety always. If and when we enter the construction phase, we will be sure to hold safety as our top priority and leave everything the same or better than we found it. Lastly, we are guided by innovation and industry development. As we move towards more advanced decarbonization solutions, wind technology will continue to improve and therefore drive down the costs. So we aim to be a leader in this new industry and support innovation where we can, which is really consistent with us coming into the town of Falmouth that has several research institutions and a strong scientific culture. Here are some more specifics about the Mayflower Wind project. As you can see on the image to the right-hand side, our federal lease area is in the dark blue rectangle. The actual wind farm will be 30 miles south of Martha's Vineyard and 20 miles south of Nantucket. It has the potential to generate up to or over 1,600 megawatts of clean energy. The power from these turbines will be exported through underground cables, which are running underwater, as you can see in the green lines. The technology to bring the cables on shore is horizontal directional drilling, which was used for the cables that come in from Martha's Vineyard on Surf Drive Beach on Mill Road. And all that will be seen near the beach after this procedure is done, hypothetically, is a manhole cover. And Seth will take a closer look at this technology later in the presentation. And just to be really clear, the cables will continue underground underneath the beach and surface miles inland at an onshore substation far away from the beach and the beach neighborhoods. So this is really the larger context as to why we're here with you this evening, why we're building this project, and why it's so important. This is a clean energy project that is contributing to the decarbonization of Massachusetts, which is absolutely essential as we begin to adapt to the climate crisis. As we all know, and as Representative Fernandes just mentioned, Falmouth is particularly vulnerable to what the climate crisis has in store, from sea level rise, coastal degradation, and more because of its almost 70 miles of coastline, which is more than any Massachusetts community. And these are issues that all of Cape Cod will and do deal with. So it's really critical for the community and other coastal communities to take strong action now when it comes to climate change. The graph on the left is from a decarbonization roadmap study that was completed by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The purpose of this study was to demonstrate where we need to be to reach the goals of the Massachusetts Global Warming Solutions Act of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So as you can see, we need a lot of solar and we need even more wind energy in the coming years and decades. Within a few years, we need to be building between 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts of offshore wind every single year, which is roughly the size of the Mayflower Wind project. So this is really the beginning of a major energy transition for all of us to be able to meet our goals as a state, as a region, and eventually as a nation. And this is an opportunity for Falmouth to be part of it and be a leading force. A little bit more on climate. We were successful at Mayflower Wind in entering power purchase agreements with various Massachusetts utilities for 804 megawatts, which is enough clean energy to power over 500,000 homes. The electricity generated from our project will go into the regional ISO New England electric grid, adding more renewable energy to our diverse energy mix and therefore decreasing the overall carbon emissions coming from our mix. So this clean energy will be available for customers across the Commonwealth, from Pittsfield to Marblehead to Falmouth, all alike. And through all of this work, Mayflower will be among the single largest contributors to Massachusetts goals that were just mentioned by eliminating over 2 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And lastly, an analysis was done by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources to predict what they expect the power will cost in the future. And they found that these projects will save the customers of Massachusetts over $2 billion over the life of the project. So there are lots of benefits that will come from the project for Massachusetts residents, and additionally for Falmouth residents. And this is where I'm going to hand the baton to my colleague, Seth.
Well, good evening, and thank you all for joining. And I just have to pause and express appreciation for the words of the representatives. We're really honored to have this opportunity to talk to the community and everyone else who's joined in tonight. And we're going to talk, and then we're going to take questions because we need to listen and we need to respond. And a lot of what we're saying tonight is deeply informed by the questions that we've gotten. So we're yammering at you, but what we're yammering at you with are responses to questions we've heard and trying to respond to. So benefits to Falmouth and Cape Cod, as Representative Vieira said more eloquently than I could, is to allow for the development of a new industry that will benefit the region as a whole. And that is very important. Cape Cod has long looked to diversify its economic base. Travel and tourism is great, and HUI employs a lot of folks, but having some additional economic activity in southeastern Massachusetts generally, and in the Cape in particular, has long been a goal of the planning on the Cape, and we're proud to be part of moving forward with that diversification. We fully intend to enter into a host community agreement. We will work that out with the town of Falmouth, as I'll be talking about in a few minutes. The parameters of that agreement will depend upon exactly what we end up building onshore, and that is being affected by some factors beyond our control. We want to be completely transparent about that, but we want to engage with the town as an entity, and we want to engage with the town as a community. And the host community agreement will be the formal agreement between us and the town. But, like I said, we also want to engage with the community, working with schools on STEM education, renewable energy education, workforce training with the local institutions. One thing that I would particularly note is that we made a commitment at the time of our bid for our successful bid to provide $5 million over 10 years to the Cape Light Compact's initiatives that for low-income households across the area served by the compact, which of course includes Falmouth, to allow those low-income households to lower their electricity, to lower their energy bills as a whole by doing strategic electrification. That is insulation coupled with high efficiency electric heat, not the old kind of baseboard kind that too many people on the Cape know too well, where you got to turn it on and then go out to dinner and wait for the house to heat up, but the new kind of high efficiency heat pumps and the programs that the compact are bringing to folks all across the Cape and Island. So move on to the next slide. The permitting process is really where the rubber is going to hit the road in terms of Mayflower providing our applications to the town, to the state, to the feds, the regional commissions and such, and really getting official permission to do the project. And we want to work very closely with the town as a formal entity to make sure that we proceed in an efficient and mutually agreeable, that's the words we got up there, and we believe in it, permitting and then construction schedule. I come off of the last few years before I was working on Mayflower, working on onshore wind, and I saw across the country how you really need to work with the local community in order to synchronize and make sure that your construction efforts in particular meet local expectations, and that you trust the local experts on what roads are best for bringing stuff in, and how to leave a place, and this is a theme, leave it better than you find it. We're going to reach out as aggressively as possible in terms of welcoming public participation, public meetings, comment periods. For the moment, at least, it's going to be virtual. But these absurd conditions will abate, and we will be able to, down the line, start doing things in person. Now, a lot of folks will ask about abutter notifications, and we can't do abutter notifications until we know exactly who we're going to be abutting. But as we're going through the design process, as soon as we are able to know who our neighbors will be, we will reach out to them in full compliance with all of the processes and the legal requirements, and let them know that we are, that we're planning on coming in nearby, and that we will leave the place better than we found it. So next slide, please. So this is an overview of the offshore wind permitting process, particularly focusing on the overall federal process. And we are, we're sort of about 2/3 of the way through the timeline up on the top there. And we are moving rapidly through the federal permitting process, and that process will provide many opportunities for public comment. There has been significant process up to this point when the wind energy areas were identified offshore, but of course there is going to have to be a real opportunity for the local community to be engaged down the line. I would direct your attention to the box down at the bottom, which is about the state process, which we're at a much earlier state of, noting that we will have to submit, and this business, it has a lot of acronyms. So we're going to have to submit a MEPA ENF, that is an environmental notification form pursuant to the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And we'll submit a petition to the Energy Facility Siting Board, the EFSB. And that will kick off an extensive public process where folks will have many opportunities to offer their views and learn about the project down the line as we go through those formal processes. Next slide, please. And during that process, and we've been frankly laying the groundwork for it over the last couple of years, there will be numerous studies. For example, we did a study of the nearshore environment, the eelgrass and such off of the beaches that where we will be bringing the cables ashore, and that was done by CR Environmental of Falmouth, Massachusetts, a woman-owned business that that runs boats for surveys. Because there's a lot of folks who like to do surveys around Falmouth, and we are going to do these. We have done and will continue to do these comprehensive surveys of all different types, and they are compiled into very extensive permitting documents that will be open for review as we move forward through the process. One thing to just bear in mind is that impact is actually a value neutral term. There are negative impacts and there are positive impacts. For example, the impact on recreational fishing is certain to be positive. Experience has shown in Europe and around Block Island and such that the people who go out on the recreational fishing boats like to look at the turbines, and there is a reefing effect where at the base of the turbines there is the potential for interesting propagation of fish, and it makes for good fishing. So that's one thing to bear in mind, that an impact is not necessarily a negative, but where an impact is potentially negative, we will address it. And onshore, moving on here, we're focusing on, we're following the rules of what you're supposed to be doing, which is to minimize environmental impacts, use previously disturbed areas, avoid wetlands. There's a lot of rules on what you should, the right and wrong ways to do these things, and we are really trying very hard to do it right. One thing that I just note is this map comes from ISO New England, who are doing a comprehensive study of the electric grid coming off of Cape Cod, inspired by all of the offshore wind projects. It's known as a cluster study. And that study will be deeply informative to us and to the other projects on exactly where we should be putting our electrical infrastructure. And that electrical infrastructure is is going to define our onshore activities greatly. But once we have the endpoints for our infrastructure defined, then we're going to try to follow the rules in terms of minimizing the cable lengths as much as possible. And actually, somebody just asked a really good question on the chat about tribal outreach, and that is something that I regret that we didn't include in these slides, because we're doing a lot of it. We have done direct outreach to the tribes regarding our earlier surveys. We are doing direct outreach to the tribes as we move into the permitting process. The tribes have a very, very special and particular role in terms of offshore development. As folks may be aware, there was a time when where the water was in a different place, and the ancestors of the current tribes walked on the land that is now underwater. And we need to be sensitive to that, and we need to follow all of the rules about underwater archaeology and appropriate surveys, and to engage with the tribes. And I apologize that we didn't include that in this deck, but you can include everything in every deck. Happy to follow up. If you follow up using the contact information at the end there, we can definitely reach out to the folks who expressed that in the chat. But moving on to the next slide, please. So one thing to focus on that we do get a lot of questions about is how the cables will come to land. And this is using horizontal directional drilling, HDD as it's known. And as Kelsey mentioned, this is exactly the same technique that has been used to bring cables ashore into Falmouth in the past. And in fact, it's the same technology that the town used to bring the water from Long Pond to the water treatment facility, up in the middle of town. And this technique allows us to position from the support vessel far enough offshore so that it does not touch the eelgrass, it does not touch the clam beds or the sensitive nearshore environment, and tunnel, basically. You're not supposed to call it tunneling, but to drill and come in underneath the beach and reach out to a point that would be across the street from the beach or in a beach parking lot. And at that point, of course, has to be a little bit of infrastructure on the surface at the time of drilling, but after we're finished, it then goes underground. So if you go to the next slide. And this lays out where our potential landfalls are. As Kelsey noted earlier, some of the areas in town are a little bit susceptible to some flooding at some times, which makes them suboptimal for our and many other applications. But we are studying these, and these are rough ideas about where we would like to potentially come ashore. But again, we will be spelling that out in detail down the line. And then we move to the next slide. This is the process of bringing the cables ashore. There is that moment where you dig the hole and you put in what is called the duct bank and install it. And then, after we're done, as Kelsey said earlier, there's a manhole. That's it. If you were to go down to Mill Road around Surf Drive, you'll see there was a gravel parking lot, and then after the cable was brought ashore, it was a gravel parking lot with a manhole. That's it. And of course, it is entirely possible that a place where such a manhole is placed can be improved in a way that meets the satisfaction of the local neighborhood, through landscaping or whatever they feel is the appropriate way to. And again, here's that theme again: leave it better than we found it, and that is our goal, I'm sure. So moving on to the next slide, one concern that listen, we're in this to do a project and that has a positive impact, and that is safe. I live in a house that's got an electric cable line in the ground in the street in front of it, and an electric trolley behind it. We are not experts on electric and magnetic fields. However, we have consulted with true experts. We brought the expert in to speak to the select board. Up on our website, there is the technical memo that was presented to the select board. There is a plain English pamphlet that this slide is drawn from. There's a video where you can see the expert present, and what those experts say when you look at that material is that the magnetic fields that are associated with a project like this are far, far, far below the health and safety standard. But again, don't take my word for it. Take the word of the experts, and take a look at what the science says. And I will admit that getting involved in answering the questions that the folks have posed about this has made me a little concerned about my kids' electric toothbrushes. But besides that, we really are, I don't mean to be flip about it, because health is such an essential and important subject. But we're listening to these concerns and trying to address them as best we can. So we would point you to those materials. So, just to kind of wrap it up here, our goal is to really be deeply engaged with the community. We want to hear your concerns. We want to work with you. as we identify the places that we will come ashore and what we will actually be doing in Falmouth, we want to work with you and make sure we are proceeding in a manner that is acceptable to the local community. And that's the best commit we can make. We have made commitments to the state and in our contract around fostering economic development, technological innovation, being good environmental stewards, and we will meet or beat the standards that we are laid out for us by Massachusetts's strong laws on these subjects. So, Kelsey, do you want to take over here and talk a little bit about our website?
Sure, definitely. Just so you all know, we do send out project updates, and we just updated our new website. So you can go ahead and go there and sign up for our newsletters. And we also just created a brand new Falmouth page that has information that's specific for Falmouth residents. That's where you'll find all of the EMF information that Seth just mentioned. You'll find how to contact me and ask questions. So we really encourage you to visit our website and to learn more about our project. We put a lot of effort to put good information on there. And with that, I think we are going to wrap up the presentation portion. We're going to leave my email up here just so everyone can jot it down. I encourage you to email me with questions, but of course, ask questions now as well. And just before we get into that part, I want to make sure that you all know who we are. I'm the Community Liaison Officer for Mayflower Wind. I'm based in Mashpee. I'm born and raised on the Cape. I'm from Mashpee. And Seth is our Director of External Affairs, just so everybody knows our job titles and knows that we aren't the project engineers here, basically. So DJ, if you want to kick it off.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelsey and Seth. That was great. With that, if people want to start using the raise hand function on the call, I will start going through one by one, and we will do answer as many questions and comments as we have. So I'll give it a minute or so here. I don't see anybody with their raised hand yet. So if you do the raised hand function, I will call on you, and you will have 2 minutes to either speak or ask a question. And then I will put you back on mute, but you will still be able to listen to all of the other people who may have questions behind you. So at this point, if anybody wants to raise their hand, and we will start going one by one. So right now I'm gonna, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. We're gonna go to Geraldine Shad. Hi, Geraldine.
Unmuted. I unmuted.
Yep, perfect. Thanks, Geraldine.
Sure. I go by Lynn. It makes it simpler.
Sorry,
And
thank you.
just a couple technical things. Actually, my chat is not functional, and I don't see everybody else's image that's here at the meeting. So is it just us, or are there other people here?
Nope, that's a great question. There's 105 other people
Oh,
on
cool.
here with you. So you are talking to them, and they can hear you as well too. So
Okay.
so there's about 105 attendees tonight.
Okay. My question is, what's the timeline to getting sort of up and running?
Well, as we laid out, there's a very extensive permitting process in front of us.
Right. I just didn't know what the timeline was for all of that procedure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the permitting process is supposed to take the federal permitting process is supposed to take a couple of years. But as anybody who's been watching the news knows, in terms of our friends over at Vineyard Wind, that sometimes can take a little bit longer. We will be producing power, in the middle of this decade. I wish, there was a lot of variables there in terms of the federal permitting process, in terms of the state permitting process, in terms of construction timing. So that's the best I can give you right now. And it's funny. I mean, I spent 16 years of my life as a professional environmental advocate at Conservation Law Foundation, and my major feeling was that renewable energy developers didn't move fast enough, didn't build enough fast enough, and quite honestly, weren't aggressive enough. And I share the frustration in terms of how long it takes to build things like this. But it's the nature of building a very large project and starting a new industry, that it takes time.
Mm. Okay, thank you. And then just one other question. On one of the sites that looks like is being proposed to come on shore,
Mhm.
Surf Drive.
Yep.
You probably know this, but Surf Drive is one of those areas that is
Oh, yeah.
very, very much at risk. So does that mean that that's potentially going to be off the table as a place where you would come on shore?
It's less preferred, and we would probably have to come ashore, put the vault, the thing that you bury under the ground, further inland in that case.
Mhm.
So I mean, we're trying to be totally transparent with folks that, for the reason you point out, Falmouth Heights is probably a better place to come in terms of, there's a reason they call it Falmouth Heights. But yes, and as a matter of fact, in Kelsey's one of Kelsey's climate slides, there's actually a picture of Surf Drive underwater.
Right.
So
Right.
we're well aware of that situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn. Next, I don't know if anybody else wants to raise their hand, but Richard Elliott asked, if all goes well, when do you think the construction phase will begin? Seth, or I don't know. I know that was very similar to Lynn's question.
Listen,
but
we have an agreement with the Mass Clean Energy Center that operates the New Bedford Commerce Terminal for a construction port. So we have a time frame that puts us basically to start construction. Vineyard Wind has the terminal before us. So, based on that timing, it's, we're kind of next in line behind them on that schedule. But, the permitting process is going to take a couple of years. And, we are trying to move forward our schedule as aggressively as we can. But there's an enormous number of variables in that. And, the last thing I would do is say anything inaccurate. And if I started throwing around precise dates, then I would be inherently inaccurate.
Thanks for that, Seth. Again, Rob, I'm going to get to you right now, but if other people want to raise their hand, please raise your hand. It doesn't have to be one at a time. I can just work through the list, but right now, Rob, you are unmuted. Can you hear us? You might have to unmute on your computer as well, too.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Rob. Go ahead.
All right, just a simple question. I'm assuming there's some level of cooperation between you guys and Vineyard Wind. If that's true, can you kind of just talk a little bit about what that might be and how that might affect things?
Well, I mean, the relationship between developers is always an interesting one. I mean, we are competitors in the commercial marketplace for the contracts that sell the power. And, and quite honestly, we are competing, in other forums in terms of buying services from vendors and such. But we are also colleagues. A lot of them are, colleagues and friends. Like I said, I worked at Conservation Law Foundation back during the Cape Wind Wars. And there's a fair number of the Cape Wind veterans over at Vineyard who, I've known for 20 years. And yes, we are trying to collaborate with them. Yet something else we could have put into this deck that we showed, for example, if you go to the deck that we showed the Falmouth Select Board, a commitment to share survey results. We are collaborating. We're collaborating with Vineyard and with Equinor and Ørsted, frankly, on some scientific survey work in terms of marine mammals, and we have collaborated on avian work. In another arena, actually, we all collaborated in the earlier stages of this crazy pandemic on COVID testing in New Bedford. back before the state had stood up its COVID testing facilities. So yeah, we look for opportunities to collaborate, in terms of sharing survey data, in terms of coordination. There's some inherent coordination. As I mentioned before, the Mass Clean Energy Center that operates the construction terminal in New Bedford, by nature of the fact that we both are going to be leasing use of that facility, we have to be coordinated. So yeah, those are some of the areas where we are coordinating with them. And and quite honestly, it is often in a public facing front, and we're looking both through our collaborations with them and then on our own to be very transparent about our data. For example, we have a buoy out there measuring the wind and the ocean conditions, which you can actually look at on a public facing portal called Nirakus, because the scientists are as bad at naming things as lawyers are. So you can see at the ocean conditions out there. And we're encouraging our colleagues to do the same kind of very public data sharing and transparency.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Kendall. Jim, you might have to unmute yourself. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Good evening. Just a quick question is, I'm not aware of having seen it previously, but have you guys determined the preferred route or routes for the export cables, plural? And is there a preferred route for that?
Well, the default is to try to draw things in as straight a line as possible to be able to be as efficient as possible. It's no secret that Vineyard, and generally coming out of the wind energy area where all the lease areas are, that it's pretty obvious you end up coming up through the Muskogee Channel in between Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and then and then we have looked at routes, and we are in the process of continuing to survey the routes from the lease area up between the islands and then into Falmouth. Quite honestly, since we are still doing surveys, we are not yet in a position to finalize the route. But we are going over that data very, very carefully, and in close cooperation with the federal and state agencies, who are very carefully watching what we're doing in terms of analyzing for things, as I mentioned before, about underwater archaeology, looking out for any evidence of shipwreck, avoiding any shipwrecks. It's an amazing number of shipwrecks up around Vineyard Haven. It really is striking. And avoiding shipwrecks, avoiding anything of true archaeological significance, and coming in. So the answer is that it is still being determined, and it is being informed by the data. And when we come forward with our regulatory filings, those preferred routes will be laid in front of everybody for public review.
Perfect. Thanks, Seth. Again, I will ask if anybody has any questions. Please use the raised hand function, and I will get back to you on that.
DJ, we got a question.
Yeah, in the
questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just going to read those. I was just going to read those next.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave Gold asks, do you think there is sufficient transmission capacity to handle the megawatts that you will generate? If not, what incentives are needed to develop transmission and reduce congestion? Is the ISO New England interconnection process workable to bring offshore wind online? I know that's a lot of questions right there.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and it's I mean, they're excellent questions. As somebody who spent many years in the ISO New England and New England Power Pool process, I think I recognize the sound of somebody who knows what they're talking about there. The most immediate answer is that the cluster study that ISO New England is doing at this very moment is to, and some of them do work late, so it could be at this very moment, is designed to answer some of these questions about the transmission capacity. And right now, and I mean, I have to tell you that there are other parts of my job in terms of engaging with the federal government around these exact questions you asked about incentives. There is hope of creating additional incentives to develop transmission that are percolating in Washington, in the brand new world that has developed down there. So that could happen. The ISO New England interconnection process is a strange and complex place. I think the ultimate answer to the question, is it workable to bring onshore wind online, is ultimately yes, but exactly what form it will take and how much it will cost and where it will go are all questions that need to be answered. But we have to figure out a way to do it, and as a society, and at Mayflower, we are engaged every minute of every day in trying to come up with answers to these exact questions. And if I knew the answer to all of these precisely, then my life would be a lot easier.
The next question is from Ken Foreman. He asks, how many total turbines, and once permitted, how long does it take the construction project? How long does it take to construct the project?
Well, the first question about total turbines, the simple math is, the total megawatts of the project divided by how many megawatts each turbine can produce. And since the manufacturers keep coming up with bigger and better turbines that can produce more power, that is a changing number. So, again, if I were to spout off a number right now, it would be false certainty, because we do not know what the exact output of each machine that we will be putting up will be. So, we know, to satisfy the 804 megawatt power purchase agreements that we have in hand, and the larger ambitions that we have, to foreshadow to the next question in the chat. Generally, I mean, a project of this kind, it's going to take a couple of years of construction, but that's plus or minus. And that will depend on conditions that are encountered, and it will depend on the weather, and also it will depend on the state of the industry at that time, in terms of, we are now building a supply chain, and if there are facilities nearby that can allow for quicker delivery and construction, then it'll take less time. If everything has to be brought over from overseas, it'll probably take more time. But there's a lot of variables, and you guys are asking great questions that I really wish I knew the answer to.
Next question is from Bern Kosicki, I believe his name is. He asks, you mentioned two different power levels, a potential of 1.6 gigawatts and a sold ? Amount of 800 megawatts. Which one of these represents the practical expectations?
Well, one of them is the potential. If you imagine, a restaurant, and you could say, how much food can it sell in the course of an evening? And how many people can it serve in the course of a day? And that they'll depend on a lot of different variables, right? And then you could say, well, there's a private room in the back where we have a locked-in contract for a wedding reception, and we know how many people are coming to that, and we know how much food we're going to serve them, how much we're going to sell them. That's so not to sort of to use too offbeat a metaphor, but the 804 megawatt PPAs, the power purchase agreements that we have to serve the customers of the utilities of Massachusetts, which, as Kelsey noted, spanning from Williamstown to Provincetown, that's the room that's booked. That is the locked-in contract that we have. However, the lease area has a greater potential than that. And but of course, you don't undertake a project like this You don't build unless you have some certainty that you're going to be able to sell the power. But we've got some time in terms of being able to, finish making what are known in the business as commercial arrangements for the sale of the power.
Great, thanks, Seth. We have Jim and Lynn are back up again. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions before I go back to Jim and Lynn. I'm going to allow Jim to talk again. Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I didn't get a chance to finish off on my.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
About that,
sorry.
Jim. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
that was my fault. I put my hand down. So, you snooze, you lose. But my question in part was the preferred routing. Have you detailed any possible routes to date? And the reason I'm asking that is that I've dealt with several fishermen, if not quite a few, who were quite anxious about learning Vineyard Wind's cable routing and what they could do for expectations when it comes to that. So I'm sure I'll be hearing something from some of those fishermen once again.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, Jim, you gotta, you sound like somebody we should know. Yeah, it's the Kendall family has got a lot of history with out on the water. I don't know if you're a descendant of the guy who donated the paintings to the New Bedford Whaling Museum, or the Dr. Kendall who started the Union of Concerned Scientists, but there's a lot of history out on the water, with people named Kendall. But yeah, we are still trying to, as I said, determine our routing. We will be totally transparent about what that routing is. But, also at the end of the day, we are talking about buried cables. And, once they are underground, subsea, under the water, under the ground, it is not like we are going to be, establishing no fishing areas along the cable routes. So, we're happy to engage and we're happy to address concerns, but this is not a circumstance where we're going to be creating, obstacles to continued use of the sound.
Yeah, if you could, Seth, would you drop me an email when you get a chance?
Yeah, so if you, Jim, if you could, all right, well, I don't want to go back and forth on this.
No, Jim,
but
if you could put your email into the chat, I will make sure Seth gets
Great,
it.
great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next, I'm going to go back to Lynn before we get to some more questions that are in the chat. So let me allow Lynn to talk. Lynn, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Great, no problem.
A couple of questions. One is, once built, what is the lifespan of these turbines?
Well, that's a really good question. Our lease from the feds is to about 30, a little more than 30 years. The turbines, the manufacturers do have warranties on them, and they, that will vary. The lifespan, the lifespan of the turbines is in, roughly in the same ballpark as the lease. But, and to anticipate a question that does come up as part of our filings with the government, we will be putting forward a decommissioning plan, to be able to, leave it as at least as well as we found it. Although I have to say, I think there is a reasonable expectation, and this is what experience is starting to show in Europe with the original first generation of offshore wind farms, that what is much more likely to happen is updating with new technology rather than removal.
Yeah, that's actually what what my next question was going to involve is, is there, what sort of maintenance do they require over that 30-year period. But you alluded to the fact too that the technology is advancing on a pretty rapid basis. So are those turbines going to be obsolete before they run out of their 30-year lease? You know what I mean? And then,
Yeah.
or will there be technology that can continue to update them so that maybe their lifetime can be expanded or their efficiency improved? Or like, I kind of envision, I mean, if we're going towards wind and solar energy to replace our fuel sources, then we have to have facilities that are going to stay around for a while,
Yep.
not just go up for 30 years and hopefully not be junked in the ocean. That would be the next thing, would be to not have them, you know, just stand there not working after 30 years and just rusting, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's a valuable asset, and like I said, the experience of the first generation in Europe has been updating. You know, so you know, I think that you have a very valid perspective, and the way these things will play out, and that's, you know, that's what's happened on land. You know, that the very first generation of turbines out in California, for example, have now been totally replaced and repowered. That is, you know, where, you know, that onshore wind has been around for longer. So that move of the large wind farms onshore to go into repowering has started to happen. And it is logical to think that it will eventually happen with offshore.
Thanks, Seth. We got a couple more questions in the chat that I'll read out. This one's from Clayton Starr. Does it make sense / is it possible to coordinate the undersea cables with Vineyard Wind and other developers?
Yes. And, you know, it is our full intention to, as much as possible, work with the developers, the other developers, to, you know, to minimize our impact and, you know, make sure that we are well coordinated. And quite honestly, the federal regulators are going to encourage us to do so. And, you know, when you've got a regulator and they encourage you to do something, you listen to them. So that is, you know, that is indeed something that is underway. Whether, yeah, and you know, we're happy to do it.
Perfect. Next question is from Joanne Morimoto. Is the town composting facility site on Blacksmith Shop Road still the preferred location for the substation, or are there other sites being considered? If there are other sites being considered, are these publicly or privately owned?
That is a potential substation site. You know, it is, you know, one of, you know, I'd say there's a list of roughly 3, you know, sites, you know, that we're looking at in Falmouth. You know, because it is the one that we are looking at that is owned by the town, we needed to give the town a heads up about it and get the town's permission to be able to go in and start doing baseline environmental studies, to be able to include it in our permitting documents. It's very important to notice that our permitting documents, we lay out possible locations. So we have to do research on a number of places, most of which we're not going to actually use, but we need to do the baseline studies. And that's why we have been going out and looking at places like that, that composting facility. And when we've been very, very clear with the town that if we were to use that site, and it is far from certain we would use that site, if we were to use that site, we would really look at using it in a way that allowed the town to continue to use it in the way that the town seeks to, and that is very sensitive to the neighbors and continued operations for the town.
Great. I'll just remind everybody, if anybody has a question that they want to ask live, please use the raise hand function and I will unmute you to talk. In the meantime, we have a question from Joseph Huckmeyer. Can you speak about Mayflower Wind's commitment to hiring local Cape companies for services and supply?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we've been making an effort to do so, and there's, you know, limited number of things that we can bring people in for. As I mentioned, we use CR Environmental for you know, the nearshore surveys. You know, a primary environmental consultant of ours is a very large company, but the office that it's being run out of that for their work for us is in Pecasset, which I hope counts. I mean, even though, you know, I guess it's right across, you know, it's right across the line at Village of Bourne. You know, we really want to the maximum extent possible, use, you know, involve local folks. For the onshore work, you know, we will, you know, I mean, I think it is very reasonable to expect that many local contractors will be strong candidates to be able to do civil work. I noticed note that there is a Falmouth contractor that has a strong record of doing a lot of the civil work for putting cables in the ground. And, you know, I'm, you know, as a subcontractor, and, you know, the best thing that we can do is, and we're going to be doing this, and we started the process of heading in this direction, is be able to play a little bit of matchmaker between our contractors who will be, you know, responsible for the big job, and the subcontractors who are where the local companies are more likely to play a role. And, you know, just give the local companies an opportunity to be able to bid for that work. And, you know, I think that that's a very, very valid concern. And, you know, so we're going to be looking at doing events where the primary contractors can meet the subs and look for the opportunities to be able to, you know, get them in the door and provide them with a fair opportunity to compete for the work.
Great. This next question is from Jack Beasley. Where is Mayflower Wind in the process of pre-qualifying equipment suppliers and contractors for the onshore substation and HDD scope?
Well, I knew that we had some folks from the supply chain coming on to this conversation, and that certainly sounds like it comes right out of the contracting vendor community. We would be delighted to connect you with our contracts and procurement staff. You know, you can just, if you drop Kelsey a line at the information on the screen, she can pass you right along to our contracts and procurement staff and make sure that your operation is considered and eligible and, you know, receiving all the RFPs.
Then we have one final question right now in the chat. How have your interactions with the Regional Cape Cod Commission and local CONCOM been to date?
Well, the Conservation Commission is kind of, you know, right coming down to us. We want to finish working with the town on host community agreement before we have a formal conversation with the Conservation Commission. We've done, you know, we've informally briefed, you know, we've presented to the Conservation Commission so they know all about us. You know, and it's wonderful at Falmouth. You know, it's a great that you know, it's, as if folks don't know, Falmouth has both a Conservation Commission and a Beach Commission. You know, and you know, we look forward to continuing to engage with both. The Cape Cod Commission's review will happen down the line. It's you know, quite honestly, that is something that tends to come a little bit later in the process, and will be that will be fully informed by our filings with not just the town, but with the Energy Facility Siting Board. But we've you know, we actually had the pleasure to we did a community meeting where both of the recently elected county commissioners were on, and we've had a chance to talk to them and in that meeting and directly as well. But you know, it's you know, the Cape Cod Commission is a great institution. You know, about 1,000 years ago, I did a stint a long time ago as a park ranger for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where I had the pleasure of meeting Paul Songus, and as he talked about you know, the founding of the commission and the importance of maintaining the Cape and Massachusetts in general as a special place. And that is a body we are very, very well aware of, and that we are informally engaging with, but that the formal engagement will come later on in the process as we move forward with the state and regional processes.
Great. So I will ask one more time if anybody has any additional questions to please raise your hand or type it into the chat function and I can read it out. Well, maybe we'll give that a minute. I don't know. Seth and Kelsey, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up, unless anybody else has any final questions?
Kelsey, do you want to say something?
I'd just like to encourage people to email me. I know that this is, when I attend webinars for the first time, I know that it's usually a lot of information to digest and think about. So if you are up in the middle of the night thinking of a question, feel free to send me an email and I will do my best to respond to you promptly. And we just really appreciate everyone coming out to listen to us. And we plan to be in the community and doing more events like this.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. And I mean, I really need to especially call out, and again, thank Representatives Fernandes and Vieira. I mean, we are at a really historic moment. Like I've mentioned too many times, I've been at this for too long, and I can remember the days when there was a lot of skepticism about making a transition away from coal-fired power and to renewable energy. And it is a great situation to be in, where our public debate, the debate on Beacon Hill, is how quickly we need to move and how much we should be buying and exactly on what terms. And we've gotten some very good news in the last couple of days as the legislature and the governor have converged on the next generation of climate legislation, particularly with respect to offshore wind. Massachusetts is marching forward, and we're really proud at Mayflower to be part of that progress. But that said, the big picture does not mean that we're going to neglect the small stuff, because the small stuff is where people live. They live on particular streets. They don't live in the atmosphere. And I regret that we can't be more specific right here and now on exactly where we're going to be landing and exactly what streets we'll be putting cables in and exactly where the substation will be. As I said, we are dealing with a lot of external forces around that. And as we achieve greater certainty, we will provide greater certainty. It's our desire to listen and be transparent and be engaged with the community.
And just finally, if anybody would like to see this deck, this slideshow, this presentation, it will be available on the website, and a recording of this this town hall will also be available on the website in the coming days. So make sure you come back and look if you want to go through the deck in presentation a little more detail, or watch this presentation again. So with that, I don't see any other hands raised or any other questions being asked. Hold on, I think I just saw one more hand come up. Let me just, yes, we have one more person, so allow them to talk. David, can you unmute? You might have to unmute yourself, David.
It's David Wicks. I'm the president of Maritime International, the big logistics company in New Bedford, and we've been handling the research vessels for 5 different developers out of New Bedford, including some of yours. And let me just say that the cooperation between the developers is extensive and exemplary. And what the process that you're going through, I can tell you because I've been involved in infrastructure. We handle the ships that come in. For the other 100 people, these projects take much longer than any of us will expect, and they will cost Mayflower much more than they will expect. I think from a public point of view, this airing that they're doing is fabulous. And I have to commend them because in many parts of the country, this is not occurring. And the sharing between the developers is much greater than one might expect. So I thank Seth and Kelsey for inviting us. And I commend you for the terrific job you're doing.
Thank you so much, David. That was really kind.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should end there, DJ, before somebody else says anything.
That was
No,
perfect.
you guys say great. That is a great ending. And again, this presentation will be available on the website and the video as well too. So with that, thank you everybody for coming, and we hope you have a good night. And any questions, the contact information is right there. Thanks so much.